my friend, some of the most powerful people in the Bible were not prepared in palaces. They were prepared in silence, in the wilderness, in loneliness, in seasons where nobody noticed them. Before God lifts a man in public, He trains him in private. This is the story of Joseph, a young man betrayed by his own brothers, sold into slavery, forgotten in prison, yet chosen by God to save nations. And if your life feels like it is stuck in a quiet season right now, this story may explain why. Joseph was the son of Jacob, growing up in a large family filled with many brothers. Among all the sons, Joseph held a special place in his father's heart. Jacob loved him deeply and often showed him more affection than the others. One day, Jacob gave Joseph a beautiful robe, a coat with many colors. It was a symbol of love, but it also became a symbol of division inside the family. Joseph's brothers saw the coat and immediately felt the difference in how their father treated him. Instead of seeing Joseph as a brother, they began seeing him as a rival. Jealousy slowly grew in their hearts. Joseph himself was young and innocent. He did not fully understand the tension around him. He believed in the dreams God placed inside him. But sometimes, when God places a special purpose on someone's life, the people around them may not understand it. Joseph's story begins with love from his father, but it also begins with jealousy from his brothers, and that jealousy would soon push Joseph into one of the darkest seasons of his life. One night, Joseph had a dream that felt incredibly real. In the dream, he saw himself and his brothers working together in a field. Each of them had gathered bundles of grain. Suddenly, Joseph's bundle stood upright, while the bundles belonging to his brothers gathered around and bowed down before it. When Joseph woke up, the dream stayed in his mind. It was powerful and clear. He believed that God might be showing him something about the future. Excited and curious, Joseph told his brothers about the dream. But the reaction he received was not encouragement. His brothers were angry. "Do you really think you will rule over us one day?" they said. To them, the dream sounded like pride. It sounded like Joseph believed he was better than them. Instead of seeking the meaning of the dream, they allowed jealousy to take control of their hearts. Sometimes people reject the vision God gives you because they cannot see what God sees. They only see the present moment. They cannot imagine the future God is preparing. Joseph did not realize it yet, but the dream he shared had already begun to shape his destiny. Not long after the first dream, Joseph experienced another one. This dream was even more surprising than the first. In the vision, he saw the sun, the moon, and 11 stars bowing down before him. Joseph told his family about this dream as well. This time, even his father Jacob reacted with surprise. "Will your mother and I and your brothers really bow down before you?" he asked. Joseph's brothers became even more jealous. But something interesting happened inside Jacob's heart. Even though he questioned the dream, he kept it in mind. Deep inside, he wondered if God might be revealing something important about Joseph's future. Dreams from God often confuse people at first. They may seem impossible or unrealistic, but God sometimes reveals the destination long before he reveals the journey. Joseph had seen the destination. What he did not know yet was how difficult the journey would be. One day, Jacob asked, "Joseph, to go and check on his brothers, who were taking care of the sheep far away from home. The journey required Joseph to walk many miles across open land. He obeyed his father without hesitation. Joseph was not aware that this simple task would change the direction of his life forever. As Joseph approached the fields where his brothers were working, they saw him coming from a distance. The colorful robe he was wearing made him easy to recognize. Instead of welcoming him, their hearts filled with anger. "Look, here comes the dreamer," they said to one another. The jealousy they had carried inside for so long finally turned into a dangerous plan. They began discussing what they should do with him. Their thoughts became darker and more violent as their anger grew. "Let's kill him," some of them said. "Then we will see what becomes of his dreams." In that moment, Joseph had no idea what was happening inside their minds. He was simply coming to check on his brothers and bring news back to his father. Sometimes the greatest betrayals in life come from the people we least expect, and Joseph was about to experience a betrayal that would push him into a season he never imagined. As Joseph remained trapped inside the pit, something unexpected happened nearby. A group of traders traveling toward Egypt passed along the road not far from where the brothers were sitting. One of the brothers looked at the approaching caravan and suddenly had an idea. Instead of killing Joseph, they could sell him. "Why should we kill our brother?" he said. "Let's sell him to the traders. This way, we will get rid of him and still make money." The others agreed. They pulled Joseph out of the pit and handed him over to the traders. For 20 pieces of silver, they sold their own brother as a slave. Joseph must have felt fear and disbelief as the traders tied him and prepared to take him away. In a single day, he had gone from being a beloved son in his father's house to becoming a slave, traveling to a foreign land. Meanwhile, his brothers dipped his colorful robe in animal blood and took it back to their father. When Jacob saw the robe, he believed that Joseph had been killed by a wild animal. The grief in Jacob's heart was overwhelming. But what nobody realized was this: Joseph was not dead. God was moving him into a new chapter of his life. The journey to Egypt was long and difficult. Joseph traveled with strangers who had purchased him like property. He had lost everything familiar, his home, his family, and his freedom. The dreams he once believed in must have felt impossible now. How could someone who dreamed of leadership end up as a slave in a foreign land? But sometimes the road to God's purpose begins in a place that looks completely opposite of the promise. When Joseph arrived in Egypt, he was sold again. This time, he was purchased by a man named Potiphar, an officer who served in Pharaoh's palace. Potiphar was an important man with great authority. His household was large and filled with servants and responsibilities. Joseph now had to start a completely new life. Yet something remarkable began to happen. Even though Joseph was a slave, the Bible tells us that the Lord was with him. Everything Joseph did began to succeed. Potiphar noticed that Joseph worked with honesty, discipline, and wisdom. Slowly, Joseph earned the trust of his master. Sometimes, God's favor appears even in the middle of difficult circumstances, and Joseph was about to discover that God had not forgotten him. Potiphar observed Joseph carefully over time. He saw that Joseph was responsible and trustworthy in everything he did, whether it was managing tasks, organizing work, or serving the household. Joseph did his work faithfully. Eventually, Potiphar placed Joseph in charge of his entire house. This meant Joseph was responsible for managing the servants, the finances, and the daily operations of the household. For a man who had once been thrown into a pit and sold as a slave, this was a remarkable position of trust. God was quietly lifting Joseph step by step. The Bible says that because of Joseph, everything in Potiphar's house began to prosper. His fields were successful. His household ran smoothly. His wealth increased. Even though Joseph was far from home and living in a foreign land, God continued to bless the work of his hands. Sometimes, when life feels unfair, God is still preparing something in the background. Joseph had lost his family and his freedom, but he had not lost God's presence, and that presence would continue guiding him through every challenge ahead. Joseph grew into a strong and capable young man. The responsibilities he carried inside Potiphar's house helped him develop leadership and discipline. But another test was coming, a test not of skill, but of character. Potiphar's wife began to notice Joseph. She saw that he was hardworking and trustworthy, and she became attracted to him. Day after day, she tried to convince Joseph to betray his master and do something wrong. But Joseph refused. He understood that Potiphar trusted him completely. Betraying that trust would not only hurt Potiphar, but also dishonor God. Joseph said something powerful to her. "How could I do such a wicked thing and sin against God?" Joseph knew that true success is not only about position or power. It is about integrity. Integrity means doing what is right, even when nobody else is watching. This moment revealed the strength of Joseph's character. But unfortunately, his decision to do the right thing would soon bring another painful challenge into his life. One day, Potiphar's wife tried again to persuade Joseph, but he refused once more and quickly left the room. Angry and embarrassed, she decided to take revenge. When Potiphar returned home, she falsely accused Joseph. She told him that Joseph had tried to harm her. Potiphar was furious. Without asking many questions, he ordered that Joseph be thrown into prison. In a single moment, Joseph lost everything he had built. The trust he earned, the responsibilities he carried, and the progress he had made were all taken away. Joseph was now sitting inside a prison cell. Imagine how confusing that must have been. He had refused temptation. He had done the right thing, yet he was the one being punished. Sometimes life feels unfair when doing the right thing leads to suffering. But God was still writing Joseph's story, and the prison was not the end. It was another step in God's preparation. Joseph now found himself inside a prison cell, surrounded by stone walls and iron bars. The place was dark, cold, and filled with people who had been accused of many crimes. For someone who had done nothing wrong, this must have been one of the most confusing moments of his life. He had been betrayed by his brothers. He had been sold as a slave. He had worked faithfully in Potiphar's house, and now he was imprisoned because of a lie. Many people in that situation might have lost hope. They might have become bitter or angry. But Joseph did something different. Instead of allowing the prison to destroy his spirit, he continued living with the same character he had always shown. Even inside the prison, Joseph treated people with respect and worked with responsibility. And once again, something remarkable began to happen. The Bible says that the Lord was with Joseph. Because of that, everything he did began to succeed, even in prison. The prison guard soon noticed Joseph's honesty and discipline. Over time, he trusted Joseph with responsibilities inside the prison. Even in chains, Joseph was still being prepared. Sometimes God continues to shape your future even when you feel trapped in circumstances you cannot control. As time passed, Joseph became responsible for many tasks inside the prison. The guard trusted him enough to place him in charge of other prisoners and daily responsibilities. Joseph had learned something powerful. Your environment does not have to control your character. Even though he was imprisoned unfairly, he continued to act with integrity and wisdom. One day, 2 new prisoners arrived. They were important officials from Pharaoh's palace. The chief cupbearer and the chief baker, both of them had been thrown into prison after displeasing Pharaoh. One night, they each had a troubling dream. When they woke up in the morning, they looked worried and confused. Joseph noticed their troubled faces and asked them why they looked so disturbed. They explained that they had dreams, but no one could interpret them. Joseph responded with humility and faith. He said something important. "Do not interpretations belong to God? Tell me your dreams." Joseph believed that even inside a prison cell, God could still speak and reveal truth. And these dreams were about to open a door that Joseph never expected. The chief cupbearer spoke first. In his dream, he saw a vine with 3 branches. The branches quickly blossomed, producing grapes. He took the grapes, pressed them into Pharaoh's cup, and placed the cup into Pharaoh's hand. Joseph listened carefully. With confidence, he explained the meaning of the dream. He told the cupbearer that the 3 branches represented 3 days. Within 3 days, Pharaoh would restore him to his position. Joseph then asked the cupbearer for a favor. "When you return to Pharaoh's palace, please remember me. Tell Pharaoh that I was taken from my homeland and imprisoned, even though I did nothing wrong." For Joseph, this seemed like the moment when his situation might finally change. After years of suffering and injustice, perhaps this connection would open the door to his freedom. The cupbearer was encouraged by Joseph's interpretation, but another dream still remained. The chief baker also had a dream. In his dream, he was carrying 3 baskets of bread on his head. Birds came and began eating the bread from the top basket. When Joseph heard this dream, the interpretation was not good news. He explained that the 3 baskets also represented 3 days. But unlike the cupbearer, the baker would not be restored to his position. Instead, Pharaoh would remove him from office. 3 days later, Pharaoh celebrated his birthday. Everything happened exactly as Joseph had said. The cupbearer was restored to his position. The baker was executed. Joseph's interpretations were completely accurate, but the story did not end the way Joseph hoped. The cupbearer returned to the palace and forgot about Joseph. Sometimes the people who promise to help us fail to keep their word. Joseph remained in prison, but God had not forgotten him. 2 more years passed. Joseph remained in prison, waiting for something to change. 2 years can feel like a very long time when you are stuck in a place you do not belong. Yet during those years, Joseph continued living faithfully. He did not know it yet, but the moment that would change everything was approaching. One night, Pharaoh himself had a troubling dream. In the dream, he saw 7 healthy cows coming out of the Nile River, followed by 7 thin and sickly cows. The thin cows suddenly swallowed the healthy ones. Pharaoh woke up disturbed. Later that same night, he had another dream. He saw 7 full heads of grain growing on a stalk. After them came 7 thin and dry heads of grain that swallowed the healthy ones. Pharaoh knew these dreams had meaning, but none of his advisors or magicians could explain them. And suddenly, someone remembered Joseph. The chief cupbearer suddenly remembered the young man in prison who had interpreted dreams correctly. He told Pharaoh about Joseph and how his interpretations had come true. Immediately, Pharaoh ordered that Joseph be brought from the prison. Joseph was quickly washed, given clean clothes, and brought before the king of Egypt. Imagine the moment. One day Joseph was sitting in a prison cell. The next day he was standing before the most powerful ruler in the land. Pharaoh explained his dreams and asked Joseph if he could interpret them. Joseph answered with humility. "I cannot do it," he said, "but God will give Pharaoh the answer he desires." Joseph understood that the wisdom did not come from him. It came from God, and God was about to reveal a message that would change the future of an entire nation. Joseph explained that both of Pharaoh's dreams had the same meaning. God was revealing what was about to happen in Egypt. 7 years of great abundance were coming. Crops would grow successfully, and the land would produce more food than ever before. But after those 7 years, a terrible famine would arrive. The famine would be so severe that people would forget the years of abundance. Joseph then offered wise advice. He suggested that Pharaoh appoint a leader to collect and store food during the years of abundance so that the nation would survive the coming famine. Pharaoh and his advisors were amazed. Not only had Joseph explained the dreams, but he had also provided a solution. Pharaoh recognized that God's wisdom was with Joseph. Pharaoh made a decision that no one expected. He placed Joseph in charge of the entire plan. Joseph, the man who had been sitting in prison only hours earlier, was suddenly promoted to become the second most powerful leader in Egypt. Pharaoh said something remarkable. "Since God has shown you all this, there is no one as wise and discerning as you. You will be in charge of my palace, and all my people will submit to your authority." Joseph was given royal clothing, a signet ring, and a new position of authority. In one moment, the prisoner became a ruler. God had lifted him. Joseph began organizing the nation exactly as he had advised. During the 7 years of abundance, he collected large amounts of grain and stored them in cities throughout Egypt. The harvest was so plentiful that the stored grain became impossible to count. Joseph was not only wise, he was disciplined and organized. When the 7 years of abundance ended, the famine began just as Joseph predicted. The famine spread across many lands, but in Egypt there was food. People from many nations traveled to Egypt to buy grain. Joseph's leadership was saving countless lives. One day, a group of travelers arrived in Egypt to buy food. They were Joseph's brothers, the same brothers who had thrown him into a pit and sold him as a slave years earlier. They stood before Joseph without recognizing him. but Joseph recognized them immediately. This moment must have brought many memories to Joseph's mind. The betrayal, the pain, the years of suffering. Now he had the power to take revenge. But Joseph's story was not about revenge. It was about something greater. And what Joseph would do next would reveal the true strength of his character. When Joseph saw his brothers standing before him, his heart must have raced with emotion. Years had passed since the day they threw him into the pit and sold him as a slave. Those memories had shaped the entire course of his life. Now the same men who betrayed him were bowing before him, asking for food during the famine. But they did not recognize him. Joseph had changed. He now wore the clothing of Egyptian authority, spoke through interpreters, and stood as one of the most powerful leaders in the land. To them, he was simply an Egyptian governor with power over their survival. Joseph chose not to reveal his identity immediately. Instead, he decided to observe their hearts. Had they changed? Were they still the same jealous brothers who had once destroyed his life? Joseph spoke firmly to them and questioned them about their family. Through their conversation, he learned that his father, Jacob, was still alive, and that his youngest brother Benjamin remained at home. Hearing this stirred deep emotion inside Joseph. Benjamin was his only full brother, the son of his own mother Rachel. Joseph longed to see him. But before revealing himself, Joseph needed to know whether his brothers had truly changed. Sometimes time reveals the truth about a person's heart. Joseph decided to test his brothers. He accused them of being spies who had come to explore the land. The brothers were frightened and quickly defended themselves. They explained that they were honest men from the land of Canaan, sons of one father, and that their youngest brother had remained at home. Joseph listened carefully. Their words revealed something interesting. They spoke about Joseph as if he were dead. "One brother is no more," they said. Those words must have pierced Joseph's heart. To them, he had disappeared forever. They had never expected to see him again. Joseph then gave them a challenge. If they truly wanted to prove they were honest men, they would need to bring their youngest brother Benjamin to Egypt. Until then, one of them would remain imprisoned. The brothers began speaking among themselves, not realizing Joseph could understand their language. They said something remarkable. "This is happening because of what we did to Joseph." For the first time, they were acknowledging their guilt. And Joseph realized that time had begun to change their hearts. When Joseph heard his brothers speaking about their guilt, he had to turn away from them. The emotions became too strong to hide. For years, Joseph had carried the pain of betrayal. Now he was hearing the very men who caused that pain admit their wrongdoing. They remembered how Joseph had begged for mercy when they threw him into the pit. They remembered ignoring his cries. The weight of their actions had followed them for years. Joseph stepped into another room and wept. Even though he had power and authority now, the wounds of the past were still real. But something inside Joseph was changing. Instead of anger, compassion was beginning to grow. When Joseph returned, he ordered that one of the brothers, Simeon, be kept in prison until the others returned with Benjamin. The remaining brothers were given grain and sent back home. But Joseph secretly placed the money they paid back into their sacks. He was not trying to punish them. He was testing them. When the brothers returned to Canaan, and told their father, Jacob, everything that had happened. The news filled him with fear. One son, Joseph, had already been lost years earlier. Now Simeon was being held in Egypt, and the Egyptian ruler demanded that Benjamin also be brought there. Jacob was terrified of losing another son. Benjamin was now his most precious child, the last remaining son of Rachel. At first Jacob refused to send him, but the famine continued growing worse. Eventually, the family had no choice. They needed food again. After much discussion and persuasion, Jacob finally agreed to send Benjamin with his brothers. Judah promised his father that he would protect the young man and bring him back safely. And so the brothers prepared to travel once again to Egypt. Joseph was about to see his youngest brother for the first time in many years. When the brothers returned to Egypt with Benjamin, Joseph saw him immediately. Benjamin looked like a reflection of Joseph's own childhood. The resemblance to their mother Rachel must have brought back powerful memories. Joseph had to struggle to control his emotions. He ordered that the brothers be brought to his house for a meal. The brothers were afraid. They thought they were being taken there because of the money that had been returned in their sacks earlier. But Joseph had no intention of harming them. He was preparing for something greater. When Joseph entered the room, the brothers bowed before him. Without realizing it, they were fulfilling the dream Joseph had shared with them many years earlier. The dream that once caused so much jealousy was now becoming reality. God had been guiding every step of Joseph's journey. During the meal, Joseph arranged the seating in a surprising way. The brothers were seated in order of their birth, from the oldest to the youngest. This amazed them. How could this Egyptian ruler know their exact birth order? Joseph watched their reactions carefully. He then gave Benjamin a portion of food 5 times larger than the others. Years earlier, their jealousy had been triggered by favoritism. Joseph wanted to see how they would react now. But something had changed. Instead of becoming angry, the brothers accepted the situation peacefully. Joseph could see that the jealousy that once destroyed their family was no longer controlling their hearts. Joseph prepared one final test. Before the brothers left Egypt, he ordered his silver cup to be secretly placed inside Benjamin's sack. Then he allowed them to begin their journey home. Not long after they left, Joseph sent his servants after them. The servants stopped the brothers and accused them of stealing the governor's silver cup. The brothers were shocked. They insisted they were innocent. They even said that if the cup were found among them, the guilty person should become a slave. When the sacks were opened, the cup was discovered in Benjamin's bag. The brothers were devastated. Now Benjamin faced the same fate Joseph once suffered, and Joseph waited to see what they would do. Instead of abandoning Benjamin, the brothers returned together to Joseph's house. Years earlier, they had easily betrayed Joseph. Now they refused to leave Benjamin behind. Judah stepped forward and spoke passionately to Joseph. He explained how their father loved Benjamin deeply and how losing him would destroy Jacob's heart. Judah offered something incredible. He offered to become Joseph's slave in Benjamin's place. This moment revealed how much the brothers had changed. The same men who once sold their brother for silver were now willing to sacrifice themselves to protect another brother. Joseph saw the transformation. Their hearts were no longer the same. Joseph could no longer control his emotions. He ordered all the Egyptian servants to leave the room. Then he began to cry so loudly that his voice echoed through the palace. Finally, he spoke the words his brothers never expected to hear. "I am Joseph." The brothers were stunned. Fear filled their hearts. They expected revenge. But Joseph surprised them with something far greater. Joseph told them not to be afraid. He explained that even though their actions had been evil, God had used those events to accomplish something good. "God sent me ahead of you to save lives," he said. The famine would continue for several more years. But because Joseph was in Egypt, the family would survive. Joseph invited them to bring their father and their entire household to Egypt, where he would provide for them. Instead of revenge, Joseph chose forgiveness. Instead of anger, he chose mercy. And this moment revealed the true meaning of Joseph's journey. God had taken betrayal, suffering, and injustice and turned it into salvation. After Joseph revealed his identity, the room was filled with silence. His brothers stood frozen, unable to believe what they had just heard. The man standing before them, the powerful governor of Egypt, was the same brother they had betrayed years ago. Joseph stepped closer to them. He saw the fear in their eyes. They were expecting punishment. They believed this moment would bring judgment for what they had done. But Joseph's heart had changed. Instead of anger, he felt compassion. He reminded them of the truth that had shaped his entire journey. Yes, they had sold him as a slave. Yes, their actions had caused years of suffering. But God had been working through those painful events. Joseph explained that everything that happened had allowed him to rise to a position where he could now save many lives during the famine. Sometimes the darkest moments of life become the very path God uses to bring something greater. Joseph embraced his brothers and wept with them. The family that had once been broken by jealousy was now being restored through forgiveness. Joseph quickly began making plans for his family to move to Egypt. The famine was still spreading across the land, and many people were struggling to survive. But Joseph now had the power and resources to protect his family. He sent his brothers back to Canaan with wagons, food, clothing, and gifts. Pharaoh himself supported the plan, allowing Joseph's entire family to settle in the best part of Egypt. When the brothers returned home, they told their father Jacob something that seemed impossible. Joseph is alive. At first, Jacob could not believe them. For years, he had believed his beloved son had been killed by wild animals. But when he saw the wagons and heard the full story, hope returned to his heart. The son he thought was gone forever was alive, and he was waiting. Jacob prepared to travel to Egypt with his entire household. The journey was long, but his heart was filled with anticipation. For years, he had lived with grief and unanswered questions. Now he was about to see Joseph again. Before leaving Canaan, Jacob stopped to pray and seek guidance from God. That night, God spoke to him in a vision and reassured him. "Do not be afraid to go to Egypt," God said. "I will make you into a great nation there." God also gave Jacob another promise. "Joseph himself will close your eyes." This meant Jacob would see Joseph again before the end of his life. Encouraged by this promise, Jacob continued the journey. Soon, he would stand face to face with the son he had mourned for so many years. When Joseph heard that his father had arrived near Egypt, he prepared immediately to meet him. This was the moment Joseph had waited for since the day he was taken from his family. Joseph rode out in his chariot to meet Jacob. When they finally saw each other, Joseph ran forward and embraced his father. They held each other and wept together. Years of pain, separation, and longing were released in that single moment. Jacob looked at his son and said something beautiful. "Now I am ready to die, since I have seen your face again." For Jacob, this reunion was the fulfillment of hope he thought had been lost forever. Joseph then introduced his family to Pharaoh. Pharaoh welcomed them warmly and allowed them to settle in the land of Goshen, one of the most fertile areas in Egypt. Joseph's family now had safety, land, and food during the famine. The same famine that threatened many lives had become the very reason Joseph's family was protected. Joseph continued managing the food supply across Egypt, helping people survive the difficult years. His leadership and wisdom were saving entire nations. The young dreamer, who had once been mocked by his brothers, had now become the instrument God used to preserve life. Years passed, and Jacob grew older. As he approached the end of his life, he gathered his sons to bless them. He spoke prophetic words over each of them, describing the future of their families. When he reached Joseph, Jacob spoke words of honor and blessing. He recognized Joseph's faithfulness through suffering and the strength he showed through every trial. Joseph's journey had not been easy, but every challenge had shaped him into the leader he became. God often prepares people for great responsibility through seasons of hardship. After Jacob passed away, Joseph's brothers became worried again. They wondered if Joseph had only been kind to them because their father was still alive. Now they feared he might finally seek revenge. The brothers sent a message asking Joseph to forgive them for the evil they had done. But Joseph responded with kindness. He told them something powerful that became one of the most famous lines in the entire Bible. Joseph said, "You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good." Those words revealed the true meaning of Joseph's life: the betrayal of his brothers, the years of slavery, the false accusation, the prison cell. All of those painful moments had been part of a larger plan. God had used those events to place Joseph in the exact position needed to save many lives. Joseph chose forgiveness instead of revenge, and that choice changed the future of his entire family. Joseph reassured his brothers again. He promised to continue providing for them and their children. Instead of allowing the past to divide them, he chose to lead the family into a new future. Forgiveness has the power to break cycles of pain that could otherwise last for generations. Joseph's decision to forgive allowed healing to enter his family. The story that began with jealousy and betrayal was now ending with unity and peace. Joseph lived many more years in Egypt. He saw his children grow and even saw his grandchildren. The boy who once dreamed about the future had lived long enough to see those dreams fulfilled. Joseph never forgot where his journey began, and he never forgot the God who guided every step of the way. As Joseph grew older, he continued teaching his family about faith. He reminded them that their story was not just about survival, but about trusting God even in the darkest seasons. Joseph knew something many people struggle to understand. God does not waste pain. Every hardship can become part of a greater purpose. Joseph believed that God's promises extended far beyond his own lifetime. He reminded his people that one day God would lead them out of Egypt and return them to the land promised to their ancestors. Joseph's faith looked forward into the future. He trusted that God's plan was still unfolding. Before Joseph died, he made a final request. He asked his people that when God eventually led them out of Egypt, they should carry his bones with them. Joseph believed that God's promises would be fulfilled. Even after death, he wanted to remain part of that journey. This was a declaration of faith. Joseph lived to be 110 years old. His life had traveled through many different seasons: privilege, betrayal, slavery, prison, leadership, and restoration. But through every season, one truth remained constant. God was with him. Joseph's story teaches us something powerful. Sometimes the road to purpose includes suffering. Sometimes the path to destiny passes through places we never expected. But God can transform every chapter of our story. When people betray us, forgiveness can feel impossible. When life becomes unfair, faith can feel difficult. But Joseph's life shows that holding on to bitterness only traps us in the past. Forgiveness frees us to move forward. Joseph never allowed pain to define his future. Instead, he allowed faith to guide his decisions. His strength did not come from power or position. It came from trusting God. The dreams Joseph received as a young man were not just about power or success. They were about purpose. God had chosen Joseph to protect a family that would one day grow into a nation. Joseph's story reminds us that God sees what we cannot see. While we experience confusion, delay, and hardship, God is already shaping the future. Every moment of your life can become part of a greater story. Joseph's life proves one powerful truth. Your present struggle does not define your final destination. The pit did not stop Joseph. Slavery did not stop Joseph. Prison did not stop Joseph. Because when God has a purpose for your life, no obstacle can cancel it. So, if your life feels unfair, if you feel forgotten, if you feel like your dreams are buried, remember Joseph. What others meant for harm, God can turn into something good. And the same God who guided Joseph's story is still writing yours.